6 of SC Constitutional Carry, where your brain cells die one cell at a time every time a Democrat opens their mouth. Every time a single sentence is said, it's painful. So painful. It is more painful watching the South Carolina Senate than watching Coop streams watching the federal government. It is that painful. And unfortunately, we just keep going. Going and going and going. Yep. That's just how it is. Is there anything else on that? Your name. There we go. There we go. So yeah. Are they going yet? No. They said they'll be live at 11 o'clock. Debatable, Warsaw. Debatable. But again, I might be in and out today. Things going on. So I'm just warning you. Boy. We still got about 2 minutes left before they're supposed to start. I'm just going to run the whole thing this time. So we're waiting. What's going on, Norm? How you doing, buddy? We're going through South Carolina constitutional carry, and it's honestly, this is not the shit you signed up for. Not the shit I signed up for. These if these idiots can become lawyers and become politicians, then literally anybody can be a fucking politician. Anybody can be a politician at this point if these idiots can get elected. It's bad. It's really bad. So we're just waiting on the is it worse than California? Wow. You might have me beat on that one. You might have me beat. Uh-oh, here they go. You're right. You're right about that one, Norm. The politicians in California might be stupider than the ones in South Carolina, but the ones in South Carolina really take the cake because they have the accents. So, again, we're waiting on it. Yeah. Well, that's the thing about the Constitution. You know, the people who started this country, they came from all walks of life: farmers, plantation owners, politicians, soldiers, you know, teachers, everybody, inventors. So at this point, anybody can be a politician. You just got to have enough backing. Oh, I'm not awake yet. I may need to get some more coffee or kofifi. I think it's kofifi. Yes. I may have to play some video games while listening to this because otherwise I may not make it. I may not make it tonight or today because they went until last night. They went until like 11:50 last night.
Members of the Senate and guests will please rise as we receive our distinguished president.
Well, good luck, Norm. I hope everything works out for you, man. Yep, I will. I will. Now, what I have to deal with is listening to the Democrats and the independents that couldn't get elected as a Democrat in their area.
The Senate will please come to order.
It's ridiculous.
Members and guests will remain standing while we're led in our devotion by our chaplain, followed by the
All right,
pledge
I'm going to shut
of
up
allegiance.
and let this
Chaplain.
go.
Finding himself in a valley full of bones, Ezekiel declared, "As I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone." From Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 7. Friends, join me as we bow in prayer. O blessed, most holy God, we cannot help but be struck by Ezekiel's spirit of faithfulness as he was facing what appeared to be overwhelming tasks. And yet, as we recall, in spite of challenges, your servant steeled himself and he did what he was supposed to do. Today, Lord, in the face of their weariness and likely even exasperation,
Buy it if you can.
These senators and their dedicated staff members are also facing formidable challenges. So we pray, Lord, that you will lead these modern day servants as they work together to resolve a number of major issues. And by your grace, may their decisions ultimately enrich the lives of everyone in our state. This we pray in your loving name, O Lord. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So that's where those weary.
So,
Please be seated. Please be seated. Senator from Lexington, Senator Setzler, what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, I move for a call of the Senate.
Call of the Senate's been requested. Clerk will ring the bell. Got it. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
there we go. Very good.
The reading clerk would please call the roll of the Senate as a quorum of the Senate has been requested.
Mr. Adams, present. Mr. Alexander, present. Mr. Allen is present. Mr. Bennett, present. Mr. Campson, absent. Mr. Cash. Mr. Cash is present. Mr. Clemmer, absent. Mr. Corbin, absent. Mr. Cromer. Mr. Cromer is present. Mr. Davis is present. Mrs. Devine is present. Mr. Fanning. Mr. Fanning is present. Mr. Gambrill. Mr. Gambrill is present. Mr. Garrett, present. Mr. Goldfinch, absent. Mr. Grooms. Mr. Grooms is present. Mrs. Gustafson, Absent Mr. Harpootlian, present. Mr. Hembry. Mr. Hembry is present. Mr. Hutto, present. Mr. Jackson. Absent Mr. Kevin Johnson. Kevin Johnson is present. Mr. Michael Johnson is present. Mr. Kimbrell, present. Mr. Loftus. Absent Mr. Malloy. Present. Mr. Martin. Absent Mr. Massey. Mr. Massey is present. Mrs. Matthews. Absent Mr. McElveen. Present. Ms. McLeod. Absent Mr. Peeler. Mr. Peeler is present. Mr. Rankin. Absent Mr. Rickenbaugh is present. Mr. Rice. Mr. Rice. Absent Mr. Sabb. Absent Mrs. Sin. Absent Mr. Setzler. Mr. Setzler is present. Mrs. Shealy is present. Mr. Stevens is present. Mr. Talley. Absent Mr. Tedder. Absent Mr. Turner. Mr. Turner is present. Mr. Verdon. Absent Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams is present. Mr. Young. Absent.
Have all members of the Senate recorded your presence? Senator Young is present. Senator Corbin has joined us. Senator Goldfinch is present. Senator Martin is present. Senator Talley is with us.
Must be going over something.
Senator Clymer is present.
There they are.
Senator from Lexington, Senator Shealy. What purpose do you ask?
Unanimous consent request for leave for Senator from Kershaw, Senator Gustafson till 11:45.
Without objection, the Senator has leave till 11:45.
So they'll be back at about 12:35, 12:45. Maybe even 1:45.
Senator Matthews is present. Senator Campson is present. Senator Campson is present. Any further members wishing to record your presence?
Maybe I should go put some pepper in
Polls will
my coffee.
close and the clerk will tabulate.
Oh, I'm gonna need it.
I'm informed we have 36 members of the Senate present. A quorum is present. Are there any petitions, memorials, presentments of grand jury or such like papers? The clerk will please read.
Message from the governor, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I'm transmitting herewith the following appointments for confirmation. These appointments are made with advice to consider the Senate and therefore submitted for your consideration. Chief of the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, reappointment of Mr. Chief Mark A. Keel of Columbia.
The appointment is referred to the Judiciary Committee.
Further statewide appointment, member of the Workers' Compensation Commission at large, reappointment of Mr. Henry Gene McCaskill of Camden.
The appointment is referred to the Judiciary Committee.
Further reappointment to the Workers' Compensation Commission Chairman, Mr. Thomas Scott Beck of Prosperity.
Nothing's
This
new. They haven't
appointment
done
is
anything
further
yet.
referred to the Judiciary Committee.
Hello, Bjorn.
Reappointment to the Workers' Compensation Commission
They
at
still have to
large,
go through
Mr.
all the other
Michael
crap before they
Campbell
can get back to
II of
debate.
Columbia.
So if you want to
The
come back
appointment
and
is
like
referred to the Judiciary
minutes.
Committee.
you can.
Member of the State Board of Technical and Comprehensive Education, representing 6th Congressional District, Ms. Rachel Turner Gainey of Alkali.
This appointment is referred to the Education Committee. There are no further communications. Therefore, we are on the introduction of new bills and resolutions. I would ask the clerk to please read. Senator from Lexington, Senator
Misha, how
Sexton,
you
what
doing,
purpose
buddy?
do you have?
For the purpose of an introduction and a presentation.
You're recognized for presentation and introduction. The Senate will please be in order. Senate,
This is
Ladies and
really
gentlemen of the Senate, if I can get your attention just
this
a minute.
whole situation with
Please
the
come to
constitutional
order.
carry is really
I
trying
have
my
a special
patience.
guest shadowing me today who is sitting on the back row. I'm going to ask him to stand. This is my grandson, Paxton Murgo, who is a junior at Brooklyn Casey High School. Please give him a round of applause and thank him.
welcome to the Senate. We're delighted to have you visiting with us today. Enjoy your time with us.
Mr. President,
Senator from Lexington.
there's a resolution on the desk. I would ask that the reading clerk read the resolution and then we pass it.
Reading clerk, please publish the resolution.
It's a Senate resolution to congratulate Michael R. Brennan upon the occasion of his retirement as the South Carolina Regional President for Truist Bank, to commend him for his 24 years of dedicated service and to wish him much happiness and fulfillment in the years ahead. Whereas the members of the South Carolina Senate are pleased to recognize Michael R. Brennan upon the occasion of his retirement from Truist Bank on August 31st, 2023. And whereas Mr.
AutoZone, take a
Brennan is an
2-hour coffee
alumnus
break.
of Bowling Green State
Joe Patterson
University,
says,
where he
yes,
earned
Joe.
his bachelor's degree in
Let's
economics.
see.
Whereas Mr. Brennan began his career in banking in 1975
Yes,
as
exactly,
management
Joe.
trainee.
Exactly.
1988, he became the president and chief executive officer.
Mr. President,
of-
can
We
we
got
get
Misha
some
Ann out.
order?
Thank you.
folks?
We are.
Shut up, Misha
The
Ann.
Senate, we're not
And
going
then
to proceed
Georgia.
to the Senate. I'd ask members to please take their seats.
Georgian said, Misha
Thank
is
you,
my
Mr.
name.
President.
Well,
Just a second.
we got two of you now. Mr. Jixer, what's going on, buddy?
Senate, please be in order.
If Barney and
Thank
Paula
you.
Dean
Reading
had a
clerk
big-
will continue to publish.
Yeah,
Whereas
Yeah.
in 1998,
yeah, I know.
Main Street Financial Corporation was acquired by BB&T Corporation. Mr. Brennan was named the BB&T Regional President in 1999, role he has served in since. His title changed to Regional President of the
So
South Carolina
those of
region
you
of
in
Truist
South
Bank
Carolina,
in 2019.
welcome to the
Whereas
pain.
a civic leader,
Those
Mr.
of you
Brennan
that aren't,
served with
this
many
is what we
community
have to deal with.
organizations, including the Midlands Business Leadership Group,
In order for them to get back to the
Palmetto
debate, we
Promise
have to wait for them to
Institute,
go through
Trinity
everything else
Forum,
all over
South
again.
Carolina Philharmonic,
Every single day.
Transformer SC, SC by BIO, and South Carolina Collaborative for Race and Reconciliation. Whereas in the past, Mr.
Not
Brennan
my
has
fault.
served as chairman of the United Way of the Midlands, as chairman of the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce, and as a member of the Greater Columbia Chamber of Commerce, Palmetto Business Forum, the Moore School of Business Partnership Foundation, and the
Joe,
Central
you
SC
didn't see
Economics
me,
Development
Joe, I didn't
Alliance.
see you. So if you were
Whereas
here
Mr.
all
Brennan
yesterday, I'm
has the
sorry I
honor
didn't
of being
mention
the
you, Joe.
governor's
I didn't see
appointee
you.
to the South Carolina
Thank
State
you for showing up, and I apologize.
Board of Education.
Next time, just make sure you say something
Whereas
out in the chat.
over the years,
so I know
Mr.
you're there
Brennan has
so I can-
received
so I
a
can give
number
you
of
a
honors
shout
and
out.
awards, including Business Leader of the
Because if you
Year
guys don't
Award
say
from the
anything,
South
I don't know
Carolina
you're out
State
there, right?
Chamber of Commerce, Humanitarian Award for the United Way of the Midlands, and the Distinguished Service Award from the University of South Carolina. Whereas Mr. Brennan is married to Julie, and together they have 4 children, Aaron, Andrew, Rob, and Molly, and 4 grandchildren. Whereas the members of the South Carolina Senate appreciate the passion and dedication that
So
Mr.
this is
Brennan
what we
has
have to go
shown
through every day.
in serving the people and the state
They
of
do
South
it.
Carolina.
A debate.
Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate, members of the South Carolina Senate, by this resolution, congratulate Michael R. Brennan upon the occasion of his retirement, commend him for 24 years of dedicated service as South Carolina Regional President of Truist Bank, and wish him much happiness and fulfillment in the years ahead.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Thank you for your years of distinguished service. The resolution had previously been adopted. The senator from Lexington.
Mike, I want to personally thank you. You and your wife, Julie, are personal friends of my wife and I. Your daughter, Molly, worked for me as a page here in the Senate. On behalf of the state of South Carolina, I want to say thank you for the tireless efforts you made every day to try to improve the lives of the citizens of South Carolina. And we thank you for that, and we will never forget it. And
Coop,
we're
you got a
proud of
link.
you, and God bless you.
Congratulations.
email.
Good to see you today. Thank you.
Treads, just listen in
Thank
the
you,
background.
Senator from
Thank you,
Lexington.
Tread.
Senator from Richland, Senator Devine, what purpose do you rise?
For the purposes of introduction.
You're
Lauren is out there.
recognized for introduction. Senator from Richland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I too have a shadow with me today. My shadow is my middle daughter, Jade Devine, who's sitting in the back. Jade, if you would stand. Jade is an 8th grader at W.G. Sanders Middle School. She is a straight A student. She is captain of the cheer team. She is also part of the drama team. All around a wonderful child, if I do say so myself. And all the places she could shadow today, she wanted to kind of see what we do up here. And so I'm excited to have her shadow me today.
Welcome to the Senate. We're delighted to have you with us today. Enjoy your time here in the Senate. Senator from Berkeley, Senator Grooms, what purpose do you rise, sir?
I have 2 unanimous consent requests.
State your request.
Unanimous consent to recall
Yeah.
a road naming
Misha,
bill
and-
from
yeah,
the Senate
ain't that the
Transportation
truth?
Committee and have it placed on the calendar. This would be House Bill 4878, a road naming resolution in Lexington County.
Is there objection to the senator from Berkeley's unanimous consent request to have H 4878 discharged from the Transportation Committee and placed on our calendar? Hear no objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, unanimous consent to recall from the Senate Transportation Committee a road naming resolution in Dillon County, House Bill 4841, and have it placed on the calendar.
Is there objection to the unanimous consent request by the senator from Berkeley to have H 4841 discharged from the Transportation Committee and placed on our calendar? Hear no objection, so ordered. Thank you, Senator. Senator from Sumter, what purpose do you ask, sir?
Unanimous consent request.
State your request.
Mr. President, I would ask on the next available date that the Senate adjourn in memory of John Kaufman, who recently passed away. He was the director of the Kershaw County elections and did a wonderful job in that role for many years, and just had a wonderful family and was recently passed away. And so I would just ask again that we adjourn in his memory.
Without objection, on the next available day, we'll adjourn in memory of the gentleman and thank him for his service. Thank you, Senator. We have no further communications. Correct. Therefore, we're on the introduction of new bills and resolutions. I would ask the reading clerk to please read.
Introduction of a bill by Senator Kimbrell and others, amending the code relating to prohibited conduct and providing investment advice regarding securities so as to set disclosure standards for investment advisors who render services based on social or non-financial factors.
Senator from Spartanburg, Senator Kimbrell, what purpose do you rise, sir?
Mr. President, for a brief introductory remarks.
You're recognized for introductory remarks. Senator from Spartanburg for up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, members of the Senate. As you recall, recently, beginning of this session, we took some action on the state retirement pension plan as it pertains to ESG scores, social credit scores, and I think that was a good bipartisan effort to try to tackle non-financial criteria as it pertains to the state retirement pension plan. The legislation I'm introducing today with a number of colleagues is trying to take that a step further and make sure that we don't just protect investors in the state retirement pension plan, we also protect consumers. So what this bill would do is require just disclosure. No one's saying we're going to ban somebody from investing in an ESG. I have no problem. If you want to do that, you're welcome to do it. It's a free country. We're trying to preserve that notion of a free country. And so I think you have every right to invest in an ESG fund if you'd like. However, we have seen consistently that ESG funds underperform the S&P 500. There are exceptions to that, but as a general rule, ESG funds typically underperform the S&P 500. And yet there's been a huge push by institutional investment houses and brokerage houses to put folks into these ESG funds, even if they do underperform, because it's about ideology versus actual return on investment. In my opinion, ESG attempts to circumvent the ballot box and push an ideological agenda through controlling the flow of capital in private capital investment markets. So what this bill would essentially do is just say if it's a discretionary investment, when you go make an investment, if it's ESG considered, if the whole thing's about ESG and it's a non-financial consideration, that you have a disclosure. It's disclosed to you that that's what they're doing. I think knowledge is power. If you want to continue to invest in an ESG fund because you agree ideologically, fine. But I don't think people should be forced into them without their knowledge. So ultimately, this is a step forward to build upon what we just did in the state retirement pension plan and protect consumers and require disclosures so you know what you're investing into before you do it. And you're not forced to agree with somebody's agenda, even if you don't share those values. So I'd encourage y'all to look at that and then potentially consider co-sponsoring it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator from Spartanburg. This bill is referred to the Banking and Insurance Committee. The reading clerk will continue to read.
Introduction of a bill by Senator Goldfinch. It amends the code relating to the termination of sex offender registration requirements so as to provide termination for Tier 1 and Tier 2 offenders after a specified period of time following the completion of the entire original sentence.
This bill is referred to the Judiciary Committee.
Bill by Senator Michael Johnson and others, amending the code relating to property tax exemptions so as to provide that the exemption for certain property of a nonprofit housing corporation only applies to the percentage of property that equals the corporation's ownership interest in the property.
No, okay. Bill is referred to the Finance Committee.
Bill by Senator Massey. It amends the code by adding a section to create a special license plate for members of the South Carolina equine industry.
Bill is referred to the Transportation Committee.
Introduction of H 4868, a bill which amends an act relating to the time and method by which non-members of the Florence County School District Number 3 Board of Trustees are elected.
This bill is placed on the local calendar.
Introduction of House Bill 4700, bill which adds an article to the code so as to provide definitions, provide that a social media company may not permit certain minors to account holders to provide requirements for social media companies to provide that a social media company shall provide certain parents or guardians with certain information.
Bill is referred to the Judiciary Committee. Senator from Orangeburg, Senator Hutto, what purpose do you ask?
To recognize somebody. Introduction.
Introduction. You're recognized for introduction. Senate will be in order as the senator from Orangeburg is recognized. Senator Hutto for introduction.
Members of the Senate, I have a shadow today who is a newly elected city council member from Barnwell, standing right up here. This is Jana Myers. Jana Black Myers, and I emphasize the Black for just a second because many of you know her father, Danny Black, who serves as the longtime economic development person from our region, the Southern Carolina region. So, Jana, we're so pleased to have you here today. She's only been to one city council meeting so far, but she says that there are a lot of things that she wants to get accomplished. We've got some challenges relative to housing in our area that she's going to tackle. And so let's all give Jana a warm welcome to the South Carolina Senate.
Welcome to the Senate. We're delighted to have you visiting with us today. Good to see you.
Georgian said I just did my Spanish.
The reading
homework.
clerk will
Well,
continue to read.
Introduction of House Bill 3424. This bill adds a section to the code to provide definitions to provide that
too early
it's
for me to
unlawful
speak
for an operator to make pornographic websites available to persons under the age of 18.
No.
This bill is referred to the Judiciary Committee.
Medical Affairs Committee reports favorable amendments on S-558, bill by Senator Verdon. It amends the code so as to provide that procedures for
You
the
think?
tuberculosis testing of applicant residents and newly admitted residents of nursing homes in this state.
Placed on the calendar.
Medical Affairs Committee has reported favorable with amendments on S-408, bill by Senator Shealy. It amends the code relating to issuance of license plate, license display, and renewal so as to require 1 hour of suicide prevention training as a portion of the total continuing education requirements.
This bill is also placed on the calendar.
Medical Affairs Committee has reported favorable on a statewide appointment. Member of the State Board of Nursing, 6th Congressional District, Dr. Bridget J. Holder of Charleston.
Thank you. Received as information.
Medical Affairs Committee reported favorable statewide appointment. Member of the Mental Health Commission, 5th Congressional District, reappointment of Dr. Crystal A. Maxwell of Fort Mill.
Received as information.
Medical Affairs Committee reported favorable. Member of the Long-Term Health Care Administrators, representing residential care administrators, reappointment of Mrs. Sarah D. Dr. Greenwade of Columbia.
Received as information.
Medical representing clinical dietitians, reappointment, Mr. Robert Duffel Hoffman. The House has returned to the Senate with amendments S-298, bill by Senator Bennett and others, amending the code relating to alternate methods for the allocation and apportionment of income for state income tax purposes so as to set forth a process for the Department of Revenue and taxpayers to accurately determine net income.
This is placed on the calendar. The desk is clear. Are there any requests for local bills? Any requests for local bills? Hearing none, we're on the call of the uncontested statewide calendar. If you would please turn with me to page 10. S700 by the
I know,
Senator
guys, I
from
know.
Beaufort. Reading clerk will please read.
As I said, they got to go through everything else first before they go back to the
Earned
debate.
Wage Access Services Act, so as to provide for requirements for earned wage access services providers and to provide for the certain exemptions and limitations.
The question is third reading of S700. Those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and the bill is given a third reading. Members of the Senate, we're still on third reading on top of page 11. S806 by the Senator from Oconee and others.
Bill relating to adjournment of the General Assembly and conditions for extended session so as to provide that the date for the sine die adjournment is automatically extended if the House of Representatives does not give third reading to the Annual Appropriations Act on or before March 10th.
Question is third reading of S806. Those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. The bill's given a third reading. Under second reading uncontested, that takes us to page 30. Page 30 in our calendar. Toward the top of the page, S578 by the Senator from Oconee. We have committee amendment on it. Senator from Darlington, what purpose do you rise, sir?
Mr. President, move to carry over.
Motion is to carry over S578. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. So ordered. Further on page 30, S620 by the Senator from Beaufort. Senator from Colleton, what purpose do you rise, ma'am?
To carry over.
Have a motion to carry over S620. Those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Bill's carried over. Further on page 30, bottom of the page, S778. The reading clerk will read, please.
The bill so as to create the social work member state compact, outline the rules of the compact, and define necessary terms.
Senator from Aiken, what purpose do you rise, sir?
To explain the bill.
You're recognized. Explain the bill.
Okay, so this is a bill that we adopted in an amendment, I believe, on Tuesday. And what the bill would do is say that South Carolina will participate in the social work licensure compact, which allows social workers who have or are eligible for an active license to go through the South Carolina Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation in order to get licensed in other states, as long as those states are members of the compact. The compact does not exist until there's at least 7 states that have adopted the model legislation. Currently, one state, I think it's Missouri, has already adopted it. Other states, including North Carolina and Georgia, are considering adoption of the model legislation, and this is the model legislation that is part of this bill, S778.
The pending question is second reading of S778. Roll call is required. Clerk will ring the bell. Will the reading clerk please call the roll of the Senate?
Mr. Adams. Aye. Mr. Alexander. Aye. Mr. Allen. Aye. Mr. Bennett. Aye. Mr. Campson. Aye. Mr. Cash. Aye. Mr. Clymer. Aye. Mr. Corbin. Aye. Mr. Cromer. Aye. Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis not voting. Mrs. Devine votes aye. Mr. Fanning. Aye. Mr. Gambrell. Aye. Mr. Garrett. Aye. Mr. Goldfinch. Not voting. Mr. Grooms. Aye. Mrs. Gustafson. Aye. Mr. Harpootlian. Aye. Mr. Hembry. Aye. Mr. Hutto. Mr. Hutto votes aye. Mr. Jackson. Aye. Mr. Kevin Johnson. Aye. Mr. Michael Johnson. Aye. Mr. Kimbrell. Aye. Mr. Loftus. Mr. Loftus not voting. Mr. Malloy. Mr. Malloy votes aye. Mr. Martin. Aye. Mr. Massey. Aye. Mrs. Matthews. Not voting. Mr. McElveen. Aye. Ms. McLeod. Not voting. Mr. Peeler. Aye. Mr. Rankin. Mr. Rankin votes aye. Mr. Rickenbaugh. Aye. Mr. Rice. Aye. Mr. Sabb. Aye. Mrs. Sin. Aye. Mr. Setzler. Aye. Mrs. Shealy. Aye. Mr. Stevens. Mr. Stevens not voting. Mr. Talley. Aye. Mr. Tedder. Aye. Mr. Turner. Aye. Mr. Verdon. Aye. Mr. Williams. Aye. Mr. Young. Young votes aye.
Have all senators voted? Senator Davis votes aye. Senator Matthews votes aye. Further, Senator Goldfinch votes aye. Further, members of the Senate. Senator from Colleton, what purpose do you rise?
Leave for the senator from Richland, Senator McLeod,
Without-
for about an hour.
For an hour. Without objection, the senator is granted leave for an hour. Further, members of the Senate wishing to cast your votes. Have all members voted? Polls will close and the clerk will tabulate.
Yep. That's exactly how it is, Jordan.
By a vote of 43-0, S 778 is given a second reading. Members, that now takes us to page 31. Page 31 of the calendar, toward the top of the page, H3116. We have an amendment on the desk. Reading clerk will please publish the amendment.
The amendment is by Senator Bennett, amended bill Section 3A by striking Section 1237-220, item 3, and inserting.
Senator from Dorchester, what purpose do you rise, sir?
To explain the amendment.
You're recognized on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is a fairly simple amendment, I believe. We currently allow an exemption, property tax exemption for disabled veterans on up to 2 vehicles. But we've run into situations where there are times where financial reasons, maybe the way that the lease is drawn up or the financing is drawn up, is that the spouse is actually on the title of one vehicle. So the disabled veteran is not actually on the title of both vehicles. This just simply says that they still get the exemption for the 2 vehicles as long as the spouse resides with the veteran at the same address and the vehicle is registered at the same address. Move for adoption.
Pending question is the adoption of the amendment. Those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, the amendment is agreed to. There are no further amendments.
Mr. President.
Second reading, Senator from Dorchester, what purpose do you rise?
Unanimous consent request.
State your request.
Unanimous consent that the last unanimous roll call be added to this bill, which was explained yesterday.
Senator from Greenville, Senator Loftus, what purpose do you rise?
For a request that my name be added. I think I missed the last vote.
Your unanimous consent would include the senator from Greenville, Senator Loftus. Senator from Orangeburg, Senator Stevens, what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, a moment of
You include to be included in the roll call?
yes, sir. Unanimous consent to be included in that roll call. I did miss the last vote.
Is there objection to also including the senator from Orangeburg, Senator Stevens, in that vote? Hearing none. So ordered. That would give us a unanimous consent request of 45-0.
He woke up from his nap to say that,
H3116
yes.
receiving a second reading. Is there objection to that unanimous consent? Hearing no objection. So ordered. H3116 receives a second reading by a vote of 45-0. It takes us further on page 31 to S621. The reading clerk will read. Senator from Lexington, Senator
Be
Stetser.
heard on the bill and the committee amendment. Explain the bill in the committee amendment.
We'll publish the amendment. Okay.
Labor, Commerce, and Industry Committee has proposed the following amendments to Bill Section 1, strike Section 3979-100.
Senator from Lexington, Senator Stetser is recognized on the amendment in the bill.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, this is a bill that came out of Labor, Commerce, and Industry. The senator from Florence has done an incredible job with this bill. I'm honored to be a co-sponsor with him, and the president of the Senate has been involved. This is probably one of the biggest economic development bills that we could
So am I.
potentially deal with. This bill, as it was introduced, and it has been also introduced in the House, creates the South Carolina-Ireland Trade Commission consisting of 15 members, spells out who makes those appointments. 7 of them are made by the governor, 8 of them are made by the president, 4 by the president of the Senate, and 4 by the Speaker of the House. This bill is to improve and continue to expand trade with Ireland, but not only trade, but business and educational exchange between colleges and universities and businesses in Ireland. The Senator from Florence and I have been working hand in hand with the president of the Ireland Senate on this legislation. If you do not realize that Ireland has, I think it's 9 of the top 11 tech companies in the world in Ireland. And with Great Britain and Brexit occurring, Ireland now is considered the gateway to Europe. So this becomes an extremely important trade partner for the state of South Carolina. And Ireland is making this effort across the
I've been up
eastern
since
United
7 this
States
morning.
to create these trade commissions. If we do not do this, we
So
will
I
be
feel your
standing,
pain,
as I
Misha.
told the
feel your pain,
subcommittee
buddy.
and the full committee, we'll be standing
I
on the
just-
side waving a train as it leaves the
I hope you're doing
station.
all right. If
And
you need
South
coffee,
Carolina's
go
left
get coffee
behind.
and
The
come back. You're gonna-
subcommittee
you guys aren't gonna
considered
miss
this
anything.
bill. After hearing about the bill, the subcommittee unanimously asked to be co-sponsors of the bill. The subcommittee and subsequently what ended up being the committee amendment made several changes that clarified that the 4 appointments by the president and 4 appointments by the Speaker of the House would both be 4-year terms, not 2 years for the Senate and 4 for the House. I think it was just a Scribner's error by the House, or either inartfully drawn, that would let them have 4-year terms and the Senate appointees have 2-year terms, and to clarify that 2 of those 4 appointments by the president and the Speaker of the House had to be members of the body, and 2 could be outside of the body, former members of the body, former secretaries of commerce, heads of corporations who deal with Ireland in trade or have been involved in trade. So that's the First Amendment. The Second Amendment, which is a part of the committee amendment that we're on, we met with the Secretary of Commerce, and there's been some questions, and I chair the subcommittee where Commerce's budget is, and Commerce Secretary Lightsey came and met with us, and he has agreed, and we have put language in that his foreign operations now will be line itemed in the appropriations bill where it's been rolled up. So the House and Senate can see how much Commerce is spending in foreign operations and where they're spending it. For example, they're no longer dealing with China, which was an issue last year on this floor. So we put that into this bill, and we think that gives more transparency to the operation of
right back,
commerce
guys. You
across
guys,
the world,
keep
so
it real,
that
all
the
right?
House and the Senate will know what is going on. So, Mr. President, I think that is the committee amendment, and I would move adoption.
The senator from Williamsburg, what purpose do you rise, sir?
Unanimous consent request.
State your request.
Be added as a co-sponsor.
Without objection.
Thank
So
you,
ordered.
Senator from Williamsburg. Mr. President, I would move adoption of the committee amendment.
Motion, the senator from Greenville, Senator Loftus, what purpose do you ask?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You might.
As a co-sponsor.
Okay, without, I got it, so ordered, without objection. Question is, the adoption of the committee amendment. Those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it.
Mr.
And
President, there's a second amendment that
We
is
have a
authored by
further
you.
amendment. I'd ask the reading clerk to publish the amendment.
Senator Alexander proposes the following amendment. Minutes of Bill Section 1, strike Section 3979, 100, subsection A, Item 3E, and inserts.
Senator from Lexington is recognized on the amendment.
Yes, Mr. President, this is an amendment by the President of the Senate at his request. There was language in there that there would be one representative appointed by the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce or a trade organization. This amendment changes that language to one representative of South Carolina business organization or a trade organization, because it's kind of been the history of this Senate not to designate a particular business. And in standing with what the Senate's done in the past, the President has offered this amendment, and I would move adoption of the President's amendment.
Pending question is the adoption of the amendment. Those in favor would say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
Mr. President, I would move the bill receive second reading.
Pending question is second reading of S621. Senator from Kershaw, what purpose do you ask?
I have unanimous consent request
State your request.
for my name to be added as a sponsor of this bill, please.
Without objection.
Mr. President,
Senator from Lexington, Senator Setzler, what
I
purpose
would
you have?
ask unanimous consent to use the last roll call as a roll call on this bill.
Is there objection to using the last unanimous roll call of 45-0 as the second reading roll call on S621? Is there objection? Hearing no objection, so ordered.
Mr. President,
Senator from Lexington, Senator
I will
Setzler.
go where angels fear to tread sometimes. Because of the sensitivity of time with this legislation, I would ask unanimous consent to give it third reading tomorrow.
Is there objection to the unanimous consent request to give S621 a third reading on Friday? Hearing no objection, it's so ordered. S621 will receive a third reading tomorrow. Further on page 31, S843. Senator from Spartanburg, Senator Martin, what purpose do you rise?
Make a point of order.
State your point.
This bill has not been on the calendar the required amount of time under Rule 39.
That point of order is sustained. Senator from Richland, Senator Devine, what purpose do you rise?
To introduce the doctor of the day.
You're recognized to introduce the doctor of the day. Senator from Richland.
Thank you, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate and guests. It is my pleasure to introduce today's doctor of the day, Dr. Ada Stewart, who is from Richland County. She is practicing at Cooperative Health in Family Medicine. She is the past president of the National Academy of Family Medicine, actually the first African-American female president of that organization. She is also a colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve. And then with her today is a medical student, Annie Croswell. So if you all would please stand and help me welcome the doctor of the day.
Welcome to the Senate. Thank you for your service. Appreciate you being with us today. Welcome. That completes the call of the uncontested calendar. We're now in the motion period. Senator from Edgefield, what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, S423 on page 14 is the South Carolina Compassionate Care Act. I move to set that bill for special order.
Motion is to set S423 for special order. Those in favor, please say roll call has been requested. Do 5 members second that call? More than 5. Clerk will ring the bell. The reading clerk will call the roll of the Senate.
Not voting, Mr. Allen. Not voting, Mr. Bennett. Aye. Mr. Campson. Not voting, Mr. Cash. Not voting, Mr. Clymer. Mr. Clymer not voting, Mr. Corbin. No. Mr. Cromer. Aye. Mr. Davis. Aye. Mrs. Devine. Not voting, Mr. Fanning. Mr. Fanning not voting, Mr. Gambrell. Aye. Mr. Garrett. Not voting, Mr. Goldfinch. Aye. Mr. Grooms. Aye. Mrs. Gustafson. Aye. Mr. Harpootlian. Not voting, Mr. Hembry. No. Mr. Hutto. Aye. Mr. Jackson. Aye. Mr. Kevin Johnson. No. Mr. Michael Johnson. Aye. Mr. Kimbrell. Aye. Mr. Loftus. No. Mr. Malloy. Aye. Mr. Martin. Aye. Mr. Massey. Aye. Mrs. Matthews. Not voting, Mr. McElveen. Not voting, Mr. McLeod. Not voting, Mr. Peeler. No. Mr. Rankin. Aye. Mr. Rickenbaugh. Aye. Mr. Rice. No. Mr. Sabb. No. Mrs. Sin. No. Mr. Setzler. Not voting, Mrs. Shealy. Aye. Mr. Stevens. No. Mr. Talley. Aye. Mr. Tedder. Aye. Mr. Turner. Aye. Mr. Verdon. Aye. Mr. Williams. Aye. Mr. Young. Mr. Young votes no.
Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? Senator Garrett votes no. Senator Harpootlian votes no. Senator Allen votes aye. Senator Clymer votes aye. Senator Cash votes no. Alexander votes no. Senator Matthews votes no. Senator Devine votes no. Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? The polls will close, and the clerk will tabulate. By a vote of 25 to 16, the motion fails. Senator from Edgefield, what purpose do you rise? Motion is to dispense with the balance of the motion period. Those in favor say aye. Roll call is requested. The 5 members second the call. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 members. Senator, we're in the middle of a roll call. Senator, clerk, ring the bell. The motion before us is the motion to dispense with the balance of the motion period. The reading clerk will call the roll of the Senate.
Mr. Adams. Not voting, Mr. Adams votes aye. Mr. Alexander. Aye. Aye. Mr. Allen. Aye. Mr. Bennett. Aye. Mr. Campson. Not voting, Mr. Cash. Aye. Mr. Clymer. Aye. Mr. Corbin. Aye. Mr. Cromer. Aye. Mr. Davis. Aye. Mrs. Devine. No. Mr. Fanning. Not voting, Mr. Gambrell. I, Mr. Garrett. I, Mr. Goldfinch. I, Mr. Grooms. I, Mrs. Gustafson. I, Mr. Harpootlian. No. Mr. Hembry. Mr. Hembry not voting? Mr. Hembry votes aye. Mr. Hutto. No. Mr. Jackson. Aye. Mr. Kevin Johnson. No. Mr. Michael Johnson. Aye. Mr. Kimbrell. Aye. Mr. Loftus. Mr. Loftus votes aye. Mr. Malloy. Not voting, Mr. Martin. Aye. Mr. Massey. Aye. Mrs. Matthews. No. Mr. McElveen. Aye. Ms. McLeod. Not voting, Mr. Peeler. Ms. McLeod has leave. Mr. Peeler votes aye. Mr. Rankin. Mr. Rankin not voting. Mr. Rickenbaugh votes aye. Mr. Rice. Aye. Mr. Sabb. No. Mrs. Sin. No. Mr. Setzler. Aye. Mr. Setzler votes no. Mrs. Shealy. Aye. Mr. Stevens. No. Mr. Talley. Aye. Mr. Tedder. No. Mr. Turner. Aye. Mr. Verdon. Aye. Mr. Williams. Aye. Mr. Young. Aye.
Have all senators voted? Senator Fanning votes no. Senator Malloy votes no. Senator Campson votes aye. Have all senators voted? Senator Allen votes no. Senator from Colleton, what purpose? Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? The polls will close and the clerk will tabulate. By a vote of 31 to 13, the motion period is closed. Senator from Colleton, what purpose do you rise?
A unanimous consent request.
State your request.
Unanimous consent to set in special order the Clemente C. Pinckney Hate Crimes Act, H 3014, for special order.
Is there objection? Objection is heard.
And, Mr. President, a parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Who objected to placing the Hate Crimes Act bill on special order?
Senator from Edgefield.
Thank you very much.
We further go on our calendar to bills returned from the House, S 557. The reading clerk will publish the bill.
This is a bill relating to the apprentice income tax credit, so it's increased the
Senator
amount.
from Edgefield, what purpose do you rise, sir?
Move to carry over.
Motion is to carry over S 557. Those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. The bill's carried over. Takes us further on page 5 to S 782. The reading clerk will publish.
Bill to delineate the non-single member districts from which the members of the Jasper County School Board of Trustees must be elected.
Senator from Colleton, what purpose do you rise?
To figure out where you are.
Again, I
Sorry, I
announce
was in communication on another matter.
we're on bills returned from the House.
We asked that it.
Page 5, S 782 by the senator from Colleton and the senator from Beaufort.
We asked for immediate consideration that it be
Well, we-
given second.
This is
Oh,
bills
returned from
returned from the House.
Oh, okay. Move adoption. Thank you. Move to concur. Thank you.
The motion. The motion is by the senator from Senator from Colleton. What purpose do you rise?
Unanimous consent to withdraw my previous motion to adopt their changes and carry this over to allow the senator from Beaufort and myself to review it.
So I would entertain a motion to carry over the bill.
Mayor, motion so moved.
Is it all those in favor carrying over S 782? Say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. S 782 is carried over. Thank you, ma'am. Senator from Beaufort, Senator Davis, what purpose do you rise, sir?
Unanimous consent request.
State your request.
Members of the Senate, S 984 is a bill in the Labor, Commerce, and Industry Committee to recognize February 4 through 10 as Skills USA Week in South Carolina. Request unanimous consent to recall it from the committee, place it on the calendar, and give it immediate consideration.
Is there objection to the unanimous consent request to discharge S 423? Is that correct? From the Labor, Commerce, and Industry Committee. Hearing no objection to that request, it's so with vote of power of the Senate, further unanimous consent that it be given, the resolution be given immediate consideration. S 423. I'm sorry, 984. I had the wrong number. I apologize. S 984 was recalled from LCI with unanimous consent. Now before us for consideration is S 984. Those in favor, is there objection to the unanimous consent for immediate consideration? Here, no objection. Adoption of S 984. Those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. S 984 is adopted by the Senate. Members of the Senate, that now takes us to page 6 under interrupted debate, H 3594. Amendments on the desk. The reading clerk will publish the next amendment.
Next amendment is number 37 by Senator Matthews. Amends the bill, adds a new section to read, on the effective date of this act, all pending charges of unlawful carry must be dismissed for persons that would have been deemed carrying a firearm legally under the constitutional carry act.
Senator from Colleton, what purpose do you rise?
To explain the amendment.
You're recognized on your amendment. Senator from Colleton.
Colleagues, this is the same amendment, the spirit of the amendment that I previously put up 3 separate times, but had, for those who are supporting the bill, come over and ask that I make certain changes to it. And basically, all it says that if you currently have pending charges that you would not have been charged with under the act that we're passing, those charges would be dismissed. Pending charges. That is all this is saying. In other words, if you were lawfully carrying under the act as we're passing, your charges should be dismissed.
Senator from Kershaw, what purpose do you rise?
The senator, please yield to a question.
Sure, I will.
Senator Yields. Senator Yields for question.
All right. Okay. I have just a couple of questions about this. As the bill reads, as your amendment reads, all pending charges of unlawful carry must be dismissed, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Is that, what if there are additional charges with this one like arrest, okay? And they're like a list of
doesn't-
charges. Does that mean just that
Yeah,
charge?
just that one.
And it will not affect any other charge
No.
any other way?
No. It would only refer, say if you might have a marijuana possession charge and an unlawful carry because you had the gun in the wrong place in the car or on your person or whatever, if it qualifies under the act that we're passing, then that particular gun charge would be dismissed.
Okay, so no retroactive.
It would,
Would it be retroactively apply? It would not be retroactively applied to anyone convicted?
no, this
Okay,
does not
this
refer
is
to
just
conviction.
current pending
Pending.
charges. So someone who has it, like they're waiting to go to court, or maybe
Right.
they're in jail waiting, or they're on bail.
Right,
Okay, you answer my questions. Thank you.
thank you. Yes, sir.
Senator from Ori, Senator Hembry, what purpose do you rise?
To see if the senator would yield for a quick question.
I will.
Senator yields for question.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator, when that question sort of got my brain thinking about this. So this would apply if someone were trafficking in fentanyl, and as a drug dealer, it's frequent that often that drug dealers carry weapons because it's a very dangerous business to be in. If he's unlawfully carrying as well as trafficking fentanyl, that gun charge would be dismissed.
Yes. Because you're saying that he lawfully could have been carrying a gun, even because that's what this law that we're passing essentially says.
And I've been here 12 years now. This is my 12th year, and we've both been here a bit. I can't remember a time that we've passed a criminal statute where we went back and dismissed, sort of legislatively dismissed, a whole category of criminal offenses that were no question crimes at the time they were committed. The criminal conduct was there.
You're exactly right, Senator, but this time we're saying that you had a constitutional right the entire time to carry a gun under the Second Amendment. So because of the constitutionality issue, the premise of this amendment basically is that if you constitutionally had a right to have that gun, and we're saying that we've been doing this wrong in the state of South Carolina, we should have given everyone their Second Amendment rights, and constitutionally, we should then dismiss, if we're sincere about what this law that we're about to pass, then those prior acts should be, that prior act as it relates to carrying a gun should be dismissed.
So if it were truly a constitutional question, so did you know that I don't agree with you that this is a constitutional question? I think that it is a statutory question. We're granting by statute a right. We're saying, there's all this messaging around the Constitution, certainly a lot of that. Been a lot of debate about the Constitution, but wouldn't you agree with me that the courts interpret the Constitution? Would you agree with that?
I agree, but I believe this is called the constitutional carry. And I know I was glad that you talked about the bumper sticker issue, but this is constitutional. And if we're saying that this is a constitutional right that a person has, and that's the way the bill starts out, then that constitutional right existed before this bill could have been passed. And so this amendment is just reflective of what you're saying in passing this bill. And we did the same thing, if you will recall. Your question, I think, was you cannot remember a time that we related back or fell back. We did that as it relates to disturbing schools bill. We related back. Okay. And so it's the same thing, same premise.
Did you phone a friend?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Because I see you looking down there, and all of a sudden, I didn't remember that. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
No, we did the same thing on disturbing schools. When we passed it, we looked back.
I got you.
To be fair to defendants.
And I appreciate, and I do wherever, appreciate that information. I do recall that. I did not recall that, but I do now that you reminded me.
It's good
But-
to have good staff sometimes.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I really do understand that. But I want to get back to and I understand, the messaging and we're talking, you and I are talking the same language, I think, on that. We understand that this is, it's part of the marking of any bill. They come up with these jazzy names and, try to push it through. They do it in Washington. They do it here. We just get some of them done here. So let me go back to my original question. Wouldn't you, as a lawyer, would you agree with me that it's the court's responsibility to interpret the Constitution?
Once the question is raised by the attorney, the
Okay.
court just is not going to sua sponte do
Certainly.
that. And once, and as a previous solicitor, I understand that oftentimes it's them who have to make the initial interpretation. Defense counsel and the prosecutor would have to make that determination that, hey, this has been passed as the law in South Carolina. I should dismiss this charge.
So
Whether that happens or not, in reality, often I'm just trying to make sure that it does, and that we're across the board fairly recognizing the right of a person to carry without a permit.
So I guess my kind of at the nut of all this, kind of underneath it all, and I'm not trying to trick you. I'm just trying to, to understand your rationale. If this was truly a constitutional right, okay, that was not regulated by statute, this absolute right, then wouldn't it have been very simple for a lawyer? I've got a client charged with unlawful firearm under the old statute. That, under your rationale, that law is unconstitutional.
That's what we're saying here. First of all, let me just tell you, in my 30-plus years of practice, the typical case that I get on an unlawful carry is where a person has the gun in the wrong place in the car, whether or not it's loaded or unloaded, and it's generally not added, and they come up to a traffic stop, or either they come up to a roadblock. The majority of my small cases, I can't give you a number for those, and it's usually some. I've had women or men who've jumped in a car. We've heard that scenario. I've had students, and they get there. And my experience in my circuit under Solicitor Stone, he issued a circuit-wide order that no one can get PTI if you have a gun in the wrong place in the car or on your person. So what ended up being was a lot of people who had no other records would end up with this on their record for the rest of their lives. And so in the country, we have a lot of roadblocks. During the holidays, there are a lot of roadblocks. They usually stop and they ask people to search and all that stuff. There are a lot of people out there, believe it or not, that don't have drugs connected to these pending charges. And they usually end up just paying a fine, going to General Sessions Court, and because they happen to be in the 14th Judicial Circuit, where there's a heavy hand at the top, they end up having a record for the rest of their life. And I'm just saying it ought to be fair. If what we're saying now is we're doing the right thing by the citizens of South Carolina, I would like for these folks to at least have some ability to get this charge, if it's pending, get it dismissed.
Would it sounds like your greater concern, that your more primary concern, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that it's leaving this criminal, this criminal record, that this person carries the record of this mark against them on their record for the rest of their life, and that is troubling you. Is
No,
that?
I'm saying that if it's pending on our court docket right now, something that we've said that it was their constitutional right, if it's a charge that has not been disposed of yet and it's just sitting there pending, why do we want these people to be found guilty of actually possessing a gun when we're saying by passing this bill that they had a constitutional right to do it?
Well, I'm afraid
Because
on
they
the.
probably have other charges on them. Otherwise,
just
they
makes
You
wouldn't
don't
be
believe this is a
charged.
statutory right that we're granting, not a constitutional right?
I believe it because we've deemed if we're about to pass a bill deeming that the possession of a firearm in certain manners is a constitutional right, as the bill says, then we ought to put our money where our mouth is and require that pending charges for doing what is right under the act that we're passing, possessing in specific ways, should be dismissed.
Senator, thank you for answering my question.
You're welcome.
Senator from Charleston, Senator Sin, what purpose do you rise?
See if the senator would yield.
Yes.
Senator, yield for question. Senator yields.
Senator, you know I'm a civil defense lawyer. You're the criminal lawyer, but using that scenario that the senator from Horry was discussing about, well, somebody could be pulled over for another crime and then get charged with the handgun. Isn't it already a crime to have a gun when you're committing a violent crime?
Yes, it is already that. That's not the same thing.
So it
That
would
wouldn't
not,
apply
in the
to that.
scenario he was going through, if you've got a bad guy that's being pulled over for a crime already, a violent
Yeah.
crime already, then
Possession of this would not in any way apply to possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime.
the point is, it's already a crime there.
That's
So
right.
there's no reason to worry about
This
this.
is only, it has to fit within this bill that we have. It has to fit within this act where a person is simply just has a gun in a car or they have it in the wrong place. Move adoption.
The motion is for adoption of the amendment. Senator from Anderson, Senator Cash, what purpose do you rise?
Move to table.
Motion is to table the amendment. Roll call has been requested. 5 members. 1, 2, 3, 4. More than sufficient numbers. Clerk, ring the bell.
So what they just said is, she motioned to go and add the amendment to the bill. But one Republican who I guess he's tired of her deflection.
Reading clerk, will please call the
He
roll.
said to table the amendment, which means,
Mr. Adams.
it's gone.
Not voting, Mr. Alexander. Not voting, Mr. Allen. No. Mr. Bennett. Aye. Mr. Campson. Not voting, Mr. Cash. Aye. Mr. Clymer. Aye. Mr. Corbin. Aye. Mr. Cromer. Aye. Mr. Davis. Aye. Mrs. Devine. No. Mr. Fanning. Not voting, Mr. Gambrell. Aye. Mr. Garrett. Aye. Mr. Goldfinch. Aye. Mr. Grooms. Aye. Mrs. Gustafson. Aye. Mr. Harpootlian. No. Mr. Hembry. Aye. Mr. Hutto. No. Mr. Jackson. Not voting, Mr. Kevin Johnson. No. Mr. Michael Johnson. Aye. Mr. Kimbrell. Aye. Mr. Loftus. Aye. Mr. Malloy. Aye. Mr. Martin. Aye. Mr. Massey. Aye. Mrs. Matthews. No. Mr. McElveen. No. Ms. McLeod. Ms. McLeod has leave. Mr. Peeler. Aye. Mr. Rankin. Mr. Rankin votes aye. Mr. Rickenbaugh. Aye. Mr. Rice. Aye. Mr. Sabb. No. Mrs. Sin. Not voting. Mr. Setzler. No. Mrs. Shealy. Aye. Mr. Stevens. Votes no. Mr. Talley. Aye. Mr. Tedder. No. Mr. Turner. Aye. Mr. Verdon. Aye. Mr. Williams. Votes no. Mr. Young. Mr. Young votes aye.
If all senators voted, Senator Campson votes aye. Alexander votes aye. Senator Adams votes aye. Further members of the Senate wishing to cast your vote? If all members voted, the polls will close and the clerk will tabulate.
Once he hits the gavel, it's final.
By a vote of 30 to 12, the amendment is tabled. Reading clerk will publish the next amendment.
And a lot of these
Embry,
amendments
Hutto,
need to be
and Tedder.
separate bills.
Then the bill adds a new section.
And it's going to piss the
Senator
Senate
from
off.
Ori,
not the
Senator
House off.
Hembry, what purpose do you rise, sir?
To explain the amendment,
You're recognized on the amendment.
They should only have like 2 or 3 amendments left. Unless they got
Senator
more.
from Ori.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I think Senator Hutto had an amendment a time or two, and we were just trying to get the language tight. This involves the expungement of convictions under the old statute, the old one-year statute. So in the new statute, we have the category of gun crimes that carries up to a year is expungible after a 3-year period. This would just make those equivalent. It would take that class of statutes that class of crimes and make those expungible after 3 years as well. I hope this gives Senator
The
Marjorie
Democrats
Wright
keep
Mathis
adding
some
these
comfort
amendments,
that there is a
although most of
pathway
these
out
Democrats
for folks
aren't
that
going to
have this
vote
on the
for it.
record. So from the
But-
old statute.
But here's the
I
thing.
should have moved adoption.
If the
Senator
Republicans
Collington, what purpose do you ask?
could go
See if the senator would
and
yield for a
happy to
quick.
yield.
Okay.
Senator yields for question.
Senator,
If they
I
were
know we
wrongfully
stayed till
accused of
almost
open
midnight
carrying
last night,
without-
but is it my
without a permit or
imagination or
whatnot,
does this amendment look eerily similar
that's
to
the
the
only
one
crime?
that I
Sure.
attempted
If
to
you want to
get
expunge that from
adopted
somebody's
last
record,
night?
It's
Sure.
very similar.
Throw that all into
and
one
quite frankly,
amendment.
we just wanted to tighten up the definition a
add
little
it
bit.
as a-
And so
add it to the bill,
I'm sorry
okay?
we didn't
If
consult
those
you
were the
to put-
only
to add your name.
crimes
You can add
committed, the open
That's my
carry,
motion.
then
My
yes, that can be
unanimous
expunged.
consent
Unanimous
And I
request
consent to
agree.
be added as a
But
co-sponsored
if that's all
amendment.
they're
Is
might
worried
kill
about
it, though,
adding to it.
Mr.
I'll wait after we vote on it.
No other questions?
Without
Adoption.
objection, she's ordered. Pending
She
question.
really should. She's not
is
representing
the
me at all.
Adoption of the amendment. Senator from York, Senator Clymer, what purpose do you ask, sir?
I move that we carry this over.
Motion is to carry over the amendment. Had a Senator from Darlington.
Pardon me, inquiry.
State your inquiry.
How many amendments are left on the desk on this bill in total?
Yes, let's check it. Including this one before us, we have 4 amendments.
Yeah, 4, okay.
Yes, sir.
Thought it was that.
Motion is to carry over. Those in
Why
favor,
keep adding
say
amendments
aye.
if you're not going to vote
Opposed,
for
no.
it anyways? I don't understand.
Ayes have it. The amendment is
Is
carried
that
over.
just to get some token into your Democratic side saying, hey, I did something. Even though
Reading
we got
clerk will publish the
constitutional
next
carry, I
amendment.
did something.
Amendment number 41 by Senator Massey
you
amends
ain't
the bill
doing
adds a
shit.
new section.
Sitting on your ass arguing about it.
Senator from Edgefield, what purpose do you ask?
Asked to be heard.
You're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you,
Senator
Mr.
from
President. This is one that we've talked about a few times yesterday. This deals with the duty to inform law enforcement if you're carrying, and it includes the changes that the Senator from Anderson, Senator Cash, and Senator from Charleston, Senator Tedder, and I talked about, and also an additional change. But it just says that if a law enforcement officer asks you if you're carrying, you have to, and you are carrying, you have to respond to that. You have to say yes, and you have to disclose those if you have to disclose if you knowingly are carrying, right? So if it's a spouse driving your car and the gun's in the glove compartment and he doesn't know that it's in the glove compartment, then he doesn't know it, right? So he doesn't have to disclose that. But it's a knowing requirement, and it only applies after law
Yeah,
enforcement
I
has
know.
first asked.
They're just out to
And that's what we
waste
talked about
our fucking
yesterday.
time.
The only difference in this one from what we talked about yesterday was I had the penalty wrong. It's the 30-day misdemeanor penalty that's associated with that. So
Pending Senator from Richland, Senator Devine, what purpose do you rise?
Would the senator yield for a few questions, please?
yes, ma'am.
Senator yields.
Thank you, Senator Massey. And I don't do any criminal, so I'm just trying to make sure that this is tight and does not, again, allow for profiling. Senator, were you aware that in some areas, including Columbia, that law enforcement utilize a technology called ShotSpotter?
I don't know anything about that.
So were you aware that sometimes there is technology that if there are shots fired within a vicinity, there's an alert that can go to law enforcement to notify them that there are shots in an area?
Okay.
Okay. And so City of Columbia and Richland County utilize this on a regular basis. Senator, did you know that I'm told by law enforcement that several times they don't get any calls from the community because they're so used to shots being in the neighborhood that the only notification is the ShotSpotter? Were you aware of that?
Okay. All right. I am now.
And so, Senator, based on this, I know that there's amendment and this bill does not allow for law enforcement to stop someone just because they're carrying. There has to be something that allows them. In a situation where law enforcement was notified by a ShotSpotter alert and they come to, say, Lincolnshire neighborhood, and they see a black male walking down the street with a gun, would they be able to approach that gentleman and ask them ask him about a weapon?
I think it depends on how he's carrying the weapon. If he's carrying it in his hand, probably so, because that's a crime, right? If he's got it in a holster, if he's got it concealed, then the mere fact that he's carrying the weapon is not grounds to stop him, to question him. What this would say is that if you are subject to a lawful stop, a lawful detention, if there's a lawful investigation and the officer's talking with you as part of this lawful detention, and the officer says, you have a weapon on you, right? If you're carrying a weapon, then you have to respond. You have to say yes.
And so in the scenario that I've mentioned, if there is nothing else articulable that would allow them to stop this gentleman, your amendment would not allow them to question him about
Right.
firearms.
This is the amendment I think the Senator Hembry offered a few days ago, and Senator Hutto has talked about a good bit, that the mere possession of a weapon is not grounds to stop or question somebody. There's got to be more to it than that. There's got to be something articulable in addition to that.
All right. Thank you, Senator.
Senator from Anderson, Senator Cash, what purpose do you rise?
See if the senator would yield for some questions.
Senator yields for question.
Senator, I believe your purpose here is to try to find a practical way to have an interaction between a law enforcement officer and a citizen in a safe way. And that's what's behind this. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's safety for the person carrying the weapon and also safety for the law enforcement officer.
All right. So let's talk about a traffic stop where someone gets stopped because they don't have a brake light working or whatever the cause is, where the stop is initiated for some reason like that. Because I want you just to help me understand what you think is going to happen.
Okay.
If the police officer comes to the window and begins by saying, you know why you were stopped, whatever, and then do you have any weapons in the car? And the person, because of this amendment, responds affirmatively. Is the police officer at that point allowed to ask further questions? In other words, is that your gun? Is the officer allowed at that point to pursue a line of questioning to find out if there's anything illegal about that gun?
Well, I think the officer can always ask questions, right? That doesn't mean you got to answer them all, but the officer can always ask questions. But to the earlier point, Senator from Orre's amendment ensures that the possession of a weapon by itself is not sufficient grounds to stop somebody. Now, in your situation, in the example that you've given, there's already probable cause to stop, right? There's already probable cause to do different things like that. But the fact that he's got a weapon by itself is not a problem because of the bill.
Well, I get all that, Senator. I just want to know where you think this is going after it's answered that you do have a weapon.
And I guess the next question is probably that the law enforcement officer is going to search to find out whether this person has a disqualifying criminal offense that would prevent him from carrying a weapon. And if he is a criminal, then the law enforcement officer is probably going to act upon that. But if it's you, right? If you have this interaction and you don't have a criminal offense and you say, yes, sir, I've got the weapon right here on my seat. What else is there?
Senator, in trying to come up with this amendment, I'm curious if you have talked with law enforcement about this, SLED about this, as to their view on the procedure that the amendment recommends.
So yes, I mean, I had the conversation with Officer Adams, Senator from Berkeley, about this yesterday, and we talked about it. And then I also, in response to the colloquy that you and I had when you were asking questions about should we put in
but that's the problem with
the
South
duty
Carolina.
arises only after being
We've got the
questioned.
Democrats who obstruct way too much in the
SLED
Senate.
about that, and
They don't have any
I
power in the
received
House.
confirmation.
They don't have
that-
any power in
yeah,
the
that's
Senate.
the way officers
But
are
there's
trained,
enough of them in the
right?
Senate
They're going to
to
ask
cause-
that question pretty
to
quickly during the
draw
interaction
things out
as to whether you're on. So I'm
longer
I'm
than they should
comfortable
be.
in that sense, doing what you
And
asked to
that's
do,
what we have to deal
and
with.
including language in here that the duty arises only after
if you don't like
law
this,
enforcement
if you
asks
live in South
to carry.
Carolina,
But
start
the
voting
process
for people
is,
who aren't
from
incumbent,
what
people who aren't
Senator from
Democrat,
Berkeley
and people who
said
aren't independent.
yesterday,
Because if you're an independent
is
or
the exact
Democrat
same
in
thing that I
South
heard from
Carolina,
the SLED
you're the same.
representatives yesterday about how the process works.
And if you're a Republican who isn't voting
right.
on the Republican
Thank you,
side
Senator.
properly,
Senator from
you should be
Greenville,
voted out.
Senator Corbin, what purpose do you rise, sir?
Senator Yield for a question.
Senator Yields for questions.
Senator, my thoughts or question is similar to Senator from Anderson. So if you're driving down the road and say, I borrow my son's car, I'm driving down the road, I get pulled over for a taillight. And the officer comes up and he says, routine stop, do you have any weapons in the car? And I honestly don't know. And I look at that officer and I say, it's my son's car. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. At that point, does that give him reasonable suspicion and or probable cause to at that point search the vehicle?
I'm not a criminal lawyer, but I think the answer to that is no.
You think the answer is no?
I think the answer is no.
Well, you did preface that by saying you're not a criminal lawyer. I'd love to hear from a
Well,
criminal
I
lawyer.
will say
Did you know?
the amendment includes language that to be a violation of this affirmative duty, you have to know that the weapon is there and tell him no.
Right, well, I understand that, but if you honestly are unsure,
Yeah.
I just don't want to get, because people in the Constitution, people in this country in the Constitution have a constitutional right to be secure in their homes and their persons and their effects and their papers without, unreasonable searches. And if you simply tell the officer, I don't know.
There has to be, look,
And then he says, well, do you mind if I look? And you're in a hurry to get to the dentist office. So, well, honestly, officer, I do mind. So, I mean, are we going down the road there to begin to give the officer enough reasonable suspicion to search?
No, I mean, I think if the officer sees you have a weapon and he can't question you about it, he's not going to be able to question you if you don't know.
Yeah, but then he may ask at that point, well, do you mind if I search?
Sure, they ask that lots of times.
And then if you say, well, I'd rather you not.
Well, that's not a reason to search.
That's not a reason to search.
They've got to find some other reason in order to search.
Okay. And Senator, I think there's another senator behind you that may have some more questions, but I think you've kind of answered mine. And I understand where you're going, and I'm all about officer safety.
Well, it's not just the officer safety, right? It's
Well, everybody's safety.
person who's-
That's true. That's true.
Right.
And I'm all about that. But I'm also about protecting the constitutional rights of my constituents. So
yeah, I mean, If you're in
Just
South
note
Carolina
that.
and
Did
get
you
pulled
know,
over,
Senator?
Yeah.
Senator, I'd like to
Instead
protect the
of telling
constitutional
an
rights of your
off-right you have a
constituents
gun,
in mind and everybody
just go and
else's.
give them
I
the
don't
concealed
understand
carry
how
permit
this
along with your
impacts
driver's
that
license.
unless you've got a
And if they say,
perverted
okay,
view of
you
the
got concealed
Constitution like the
permit
senator
carry,
from Richland has.
concealed
Yes.
carry permit,
Senator from Richland, Senator
does that
Harpoolian,
mean
what
your
purpose do you have, sir?
To
gun is
see
with
if
you and
the
you just tell 'em
senator would
it's either on my
yield to a
hip or in the
question,
glove
be able
box,
to answer
or
it.
if it's, you have it stored in the back.
Senator Yields,
You know,
Senator
let them
Yields.
know.
I will agree to
At
the
that
first
point,
part,
when
but
they
I
ask.
make no guarantees on the
And
second part.
unfortunately,
Well,
that's
let
what
me
you
say
have to
this
do
for
in
my
South
credentials.
Carolina.
I think I'm probably
When
the
you get
only
stopped.
person in this chamber who's actually argued a case in front of the
Either
United
you tell
States
them it's on
Supreme
my
Court
hip or it's,
in
you
which
know,
Anthony Scalia agreed with me. He and I were like that on the case. So I have litigated constitutional law, and I must tell you this. Let me ask you this question. You get stopped,
yeah, we
police
steamroll
officer asks you
for
got a gun, and you
open
say
carry with
yes.
permit.
Is that the end of it?
But right now, it's
Senator, you're the expert.
ridiculous.
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't believe there's any, well, I think if you've got the constitutional right to have that gun in the car, and we've given you the statutory authority to do that, in addition to that, I don't think you should have to answer that initial question because you've got a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, if you say yes, and maybe you need to amend this, unless there's evidence of a crime being committed, that's the end of it. That he can't say, where is it? Or do you have a permit? Or,
Well, sure, he could. I mean, it wouldn't matter whether you have a permit.
correct. So is that the end of it? Do we need to amend this to say your only obligation is to say yes or no, and that's the end of it?
I mean, it would be reasonable, wouldn't, for a follow-up question to be, where is it? I mean, is it on your hand? I mean, am I in trouble here? Am I in danger?
Well, then
That's the whole purpose of asking the question, right?
This is like being a little bit pregnant. It's you either are or you aren't. And once you start down that road where you have to talk to the police officer, and by the way, this is the only situation I know of under all of our laws where you are mandated to answer a question from a police officer.
Of course, as we've talked about before, the CWP program requires that now.
And when you go get a CWP, just like when you go get a driver's license, you agree to that or agree to take a breathalyzer.
And the court has said that's a legitimate provision. They have said that the state can regulate firearms to some extent. This is perfectly within the court's order.
Well, but because you agreed to it, an implied consent law, certainly you go get the permit. I agree. If the police officer asks me, I'll answer that question.
Well,
but in
Senator,
this case, I don't hear anybody up here saying, please put me in a position where I have to open my mouth when a police officer asks me a question. Again, I think this is a gross violation of their constitutional rights. And by the way, the only way you're going to really find out is when the police officer asks the question and he says, I'm not answering your question. Then he's arrested on the side of the road. And in the process of doing
what's he arrested for?
He's arrested for not answering the question.
Well, he can't be arrested at that point because the officer doesn't know if he's got a gun or not.
Well,
the affirmative duty is to disclose when you do have the weapon.
Well,
So-
if he doesn't answer, he says, none of your business, none you.
Okay.
What do you think? I mean, I do criminal law, and I can tell you most police officers are going to take it. And we're not talking about the senator from Berkeley, who I found to be abnormally reasonable for the police officers I've dealt with in the past.
Well, Senator, I'll say this: if you are correct, I don't think you are, but if you are correct, I'm quite certain you're going to have an opportunity to argue that. Maybe you'll get to argue your second case before the U.S. Supreme Court, and then you can come back and say, "I told you so."
Well, I'm hoping that process happens and not it degenerates into a confrontation between the police officer and the person that doesn't want to answer his questions. And I think the senator from Berkeley would tell you that on the side of the road at 2:00 in the morning, people's attitudes sometimes degenerate just based on, I don't want to answer your questions.
Well, I'll say this. Right now, if you have a traffic stop at 2:00 in the morning and it degenerates and an officer comes up and he asks you if you have a weapon,
Yes.
and you say no, or you say, I don't want to answer your question, and he later discovers because something else happens and he's looking and he finds a weapon, you're going to have a really bad night.
Well, he may have a really bad night. I'm concerned about both of them having a bad
Absolutely.
night. And I think once
Absolutely.
you start mandating people to have to answer a question when they didn't apply for a permit, they didn't say they'd answer it, they didn't agree to do that, that this is a recipe for disaster. And more importantly, is that we've done, I mean, and I think that we've agreed here that calling this constitutional carry is false advertising because it's not constitutional carry. But to the people that up here that believe that this actually has something to do with the Constitution, it does. You're violating not their Second Amendment right, but the Fifth Amendment right. Again, I think this is a constitutional travesty. Did you know?
I've been reminded yet again. I appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Senator from Orangeburg, Senator Hutto, what purpose do you ask, sir?
See if you just answer a couple questions.
I'll do my
Senator,
best.
Senator Yields for questions.
Senator, under this amendment, your tail lights out, officer walks up to your car. He says, driver's license and registration. And by the way, do you have a gun in your car? And you say, yes, I do. Do you know what he's going to say next?
Where is it?
No, he's going to say, step out of the car. And then what was going to be a warning ticket for a tail light is now going to be, now let's talk about that gun. Is that gun stolen? Do you have papers for that gun? And then you're going to say, I exercise my Fifth Amendment rights. I choose not to talk to you. I'm on the way to the hospital. How about letting me go? I know I've got the tail light. Let me fix it. It is not, you can say that they're going to ask that you have a gun and the answer is yes, and they're going to leave it alone. That is not going to happen. I mean, that the purpose of the officer wanting to know that you have a gun is for his safety, and I get that, and it's for the person's safety. But did you know that officers, when they ask that question and you say yes, you're right. They're going to want to say, can I see it? Where is it? Do you mind stepping out of the car? Is it registered? Is it stolen? And at some point in time, you may just say, none of your business. And you know what he's going to do? What was going to be your warning ticket for the tail light is now going to be a $200 ticket for a tail light. And then you're going to get a ticket for failure to obey a police officer. And it's just going to escalate because that's the way these things go in real life. Did you know?
I
I'm
did
really
not. I mean, I enjoy
tired of
fiction too,
hearing,
but
did you
but
know?
I don't think that's the way it works now when people say that. But look, if
You know,
got-
now
if-
it's not legal to have the
if you've
gun
got-
on the
sure
seat.
it is. If you've well,
Well,
I mean,
now they're
you
going to
can-
arrest you.
Not if you've got a CWP.
Not
right?
on
And
your
if,
seat.
If you've got a
Not on-
CWP
not-
in your glove compartment, right?
If you've got the gun in the glove compartment, you're fine. And you never would have to answer the question because you could give them your license and they could say, how about get that taillight fixed? And you say, fine, I'll get it done tomorrow morning. And everybody's, because he's not asking now.
Well, if he sees it in the seat, he doesn't need to ask the question anyway.
Yeah, he arrests you. Right now.
Right now.
Right now.
Yes, that's
Yes.
right.
Okay.
Well,
right now he arrests you.
Maybe. He can.
No, well, he can, and 90% of the time they do. But now we're going to say it's okay to have it on the seat, but you are forcing people to have what's going to amount to a confrontational interaction that really was only a taillight.
And you think having a weapon sitting on the seat with the law enforcement officer there and you not telling him that it's around and then he sees it is less confrontational?
I'm not for this bill. I'm
I
for
understand.
the okay that they
If you're not
arrest
for
you
the
right
bill,
now
sit
because
down,
I don't think
shut up.
it's safe at all to be riding around with a gun on your seat. It's not safe if you get in an accident. It's not safe for road rage. It's not safe for officers. Y'all are the one, and I'm not you necessarily, but this body apparently wants to change the law.
Right. Okay.
And so if we're going to say it's okay to have the gun on your seat, I'm against that. But I also believe in the First Amendment right that you don't need to start an interaction with police that's only going to, the answer of yes to the gun question is not going to end with that. You think he's going to just say, fine, have a nice day? As soon as you say, yes, I have a gun, there's going to be a follow-up question. And it's probably going to be, well, do you mind stepping out of the car? Which is going to prolong what was going to be a 2-minute stop into a half-hour stop, because now he's going to want to run the background check and see if you should have the gun in the car. I mean, don't you think he's going to do that?
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, now it's a limited background check, but he's probably going to check. And
Well, so he's got to go back to his car. He's got to call you in and he say, I've got Senator Massey stopped here. He tells me he has a gun. Can you run his background
you
check?
have an email.
And they're going to
If you
then
want
run
to
your
jump in and
background
say
check and they're
something,
going to go, is that
you are more than welcome.
Shane D. Massey or Shane E. Massey? And I don't know. We got two here and one of them's got a bunch of guns. Which one do you have there? Now, I don't, it's just going to prolong what would have been a taillight ticket or warning. Well, and to my point, then if you got the body in the trunk, the whole thing gets suppressed because because they can't get to it.
move adopted.
Senator from Spartanburg, Senator Martin, what purpose do you ask?
I was going to ask a question, but I'm not. Sorry.
Question, Senator from Darlington, what purpose do you ask? Senator from Darlington is recognized on the amendment.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, I've been trying to be on the prevailing side on a bunch of these amendments and stuff now, but my friend from Edgefield, I look at this in the end and I get what we're thinking about doing, trying to do. In one way, we seem like we're making it easier for police officers because they'll be aware of what is going on whenever they make a stop. Do you have a gun? Yes or no? In the world of body cameras and all of these things that we end up having now, if you get stopped for speeding, you look it in there and the officer comes in and says, "Were you speeding?" We got an exact law.
If
you drive
an
55,
officer ever asks you if you're
56
speeding,
and a
you say,
55.
"No, sir, I was traveling."
Yes, you're speeding. So what do you do, Senator from Abbeville, Greenwood, and others? What do you tell your clients? Don't say anything. Keep your mouth shut.
Or say nothing, and
And so
what
it
your lawyer
goes when
says.
my daddy would say, "It's better be a fool in question than open your mouth and remove all doubt." And so the question becomes,
Well, what's your
what
excuse?
do you do? And I realize we're trying to work safety, but as my friend from Cherokee said one day, whenever we had a governor that was want to make a good point and brought two pigs over to the state house, and he was holding them and started squeezing. You know what happens to pigs whenever you do that? He came back in the Senate chamber and said, "It sounded like a good idea when you left home,
Well,
but it wasn't a good
I
idea
told
when
you
you
this
got
before.
there."
The Democrats are adding these
And I don't know
bills
if
and
this is a
amendments
good
on
idea
and
by the
on
time
and
we get
on,
there,
even though they're not going to vote
because,
for the bill,
for one,
so they can poison
it would
pill
be
it.
nice if everybody
So
that we
nobody
had
wants
as
to
an
pass it.
officer would be able to walk up to a
So it
vehicle or
pisses off
something
the
and
House.
say, have everything recorded. In the world that we live in now, we see all of these matters that, unfortunately, of guns that's being pervasive. And one of my friends said, they're like spiders, they're everywhere. And so suppose we don't have a recording, and someone comes up there and there is a gun, then who's going to be able to end up telling the story? Who's going to tell the story? And so some of these areas, and even though our committees have been working hard to try to get body cameras in every one of these things so they can record these stops, if we have a situation to where there's an event and the person has a gun and they don't say it and something bad happens, you would never, ever, ever, ever get justice. Because all we know, Senator from Orangeburg, is that we have a right to act on appearances. And if you act on appearances and there's a gun present, then who's going to know who's right, who's wrong, whatever? If it's in plain view, you're going to know it anyway. If it's in a glove compartment or in a purse or somewhere else, then they won't know it, but it's not in danger per se because it's not within that arm's reach. And so I get the concept. I hadn't talked a lot during this thing, even though I talk a lot in general. But the thing is that why at this point in time, I can't even tell you whether or not under this CWP law is whether or not that the fine or responsibility is civil or criminal? And what is it whenever you have something that you make it an affirmative and make it another separate offense for something that obviously is legal? We're creating another layer. And I just think that it's just challenging for us to end up doing this. Folks, we're in the 11th hour. I know that we got a few other amendments. I hate to want to carry things over. I know everybody wants to get a vote on this. I just think that this is one that we probably need to consider letting this law get into effect. Let's see how we can improve it and then come back to issues just like this. I'm gonna reach over and talk to the senator from Edgefield just in a second. Mr. President, he has a question.
Senator from Berkeley, Senator Adams, what purpose do you ask?
Before the senator from Darlington would ask to carry it over, if I could speak on the amendment.
Oh, sure.
Senator relinquishes the floor. The senator from Berkeley, Senator Adams, is recognized on the amendment. Senator from Berkeley. Yes,
Thank you, Mr. President. So for the last 2 days, we have been discussing law enforcement actions, how we handle or how they handle traffic stops or encounters with individuals they either just stopped or a traffic stop or have been sent to. So talking about a traffic stop, there's no routine traffic stop. So when an officer is engaged or sees a broken taillight, he pulls the car over, he positions his car for a safety position so he has something to run back behind if so be it. On his approach up to the car, he's looking through the windows if he can see through them, if it's not tinted. He's doing the best he can to observe everything he can inside that car. On his approach, he touches the car, he looks around the car and decides, is the driver's side or passenger side the best approach for the car? Meanwhile, if the person happens to open the door, sticks her head out the door, they tell them, please remain in the car for your safety and mine. Then, after they make their approach, they go up, the officer tells them, hey, this is Officer so-so with such and such department. I pulled you for your taillight being out. After that part, he's going to ask, do you have your license, registration, and proof of insurance, and do you happen to have any weapons in the car? That is a normal, the very first things an officer says and starts dealing with the individual out there. If they say, I do have a weapon in the car, they don't start pulling out weapons and putting them to the head like I've heard recently. We do not start jerking people out of cars like I've heard recently. Officers are out there to make sure that they're safe and the people they're interacting with is safe. We do not pick certain people just because we're looking for the crimes and we're going out and they're enforcing whether it's a traffic law or some other violation. After that person, if they do tell them that there's a weapon in the vehicle, officers will then say, well, don't worry about getting your registration. Just keep your hands where I can see them while I run everything through the system. While they're running everything through the system, they will go back to their car if they feel safe, or they're going to do it from the radio that's on their hip. And they're going to run their driver's license and most likely what an officer calls on the road a 101 check, which that is standard across the board. That's most of the time, 99% of the time, what they're going to do in a 101 check is a warrant check. And so after they're done with all that, if they're writing them a ticket or a citation or a warning citation, they then go back up, and while they're talking to them, they engage with them, explain their citation or warning ticket, and at that point in time, they give it to them and they walk off and they release the individual or driver. So that is 90% of the engagements that I deal with and other officers I've been with. That's how they handle a vehicle, and they handle it with if there's a gun in there. Now, do sometimes these individuals start not listening? Yeah, they do. And then that might carry it over to then asking them, if you have a weapon in the car, I'd like you to step out. If you're upset with me, I don't want you to be around your weapon in the car. Step out and talk to me. They get out and they talk. They explain the information. If they still don't, then there's nothing we can do. This is how an officer will finish up that conversation. If they realize it's not going, sir, you have a court date. We'll argue about it in court. They get back in the car. The officer backs up to his car while he's getting in his car, and then he'll drive off, and the officer will drive off.
Senator from Richland, Senator Harpootlian, what purpose do you rise, sir?
See if the senator yield for question.
Senator yield for question.
I do.
Senator yields for question.
I, like you, I haven't been on the delivering end of that process, but I've seen it on video many, 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 many times. And you're 100% correct about how that goes. Occasionally, the person being stopped will lose their temper. Occasionally, and you would agree with me, the officer may lose their temper. It happens. People are human beings. That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here is during that process, is that person being stopped legally required? I mean, he's legally required to produce his driver's license, right?
Correct.
Is he legally required right now to answer the officer's questions legally under penalty?
No, he can refuse.
Right. He can, the police
That's,
officer
that's
says,
like an officer right now can park his car and approach anybody on the sidewalk or on public property and engage in a conversation.
right. But if that officer asks a question, that person currently, today, unless this amendment passes, can say, and the officer says, ask them, where are you coming from? He has a right to say, none of your business.
Correct.
Right.
He doesn't have to tell us.
Have you had anything to drink tonight? He can also say, none of your business.
Correct.
But under this, if he has a weapon in the car, he must, and the officer says, do you have a weapon? He must indicate under penalty, 30 days or $200, say, yes, I have a weapon. He can't say, I'm not going to answer that question. Is that correct? Under this amendment?
Under this amendment, that would be correct.
So this is a change from what the law is today, correct?
Correct.
And if he says, I'm not going to answer that question, he is risking being punished under this law, correct?
That is correct, but there's got to be something else there for the officer to carry him. So if he lies and, like, let's say, or the gun is in the glove box, there's got to be something else that officer has to carry him to that next step, which would be a search of the vehicle.
I don't disagree with you, but the point of the matter is this law would compel a normal law-abiding citizen to give to make a statement that's not required now and arguably violates their, I mean, if arguably violates their Fifth Amendment right to not say anything to a police officer about anything, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Senator from Anderson, Senator Cash, what purpose do you rise, sir?
See if the senator would yield for a few questions.
Senator yield for questions?
I will.
Senator yields for
Senator,
questions.
if you can clear this up for me, under current law, if the officer approaches the car and were to ask, do you have a weapon, and you're a concealed weapons permit holder, does the law not require you to disclose that currently?
If you're a concealed weapon permit holder, correct. You have to advise the officer you have a weapon.
Now, let me ask you this. We're talking about if the officer asks you, then you under concealed weapons permit law right now, you have to tell them, right?
Correct.
Just clarify for the body, are you supposed to tell them that before they even ask you according to the concealed weapons law? Do you know the answer to that?
I'm not sure. I can tell you my engagements that I've ever dealt with anybody with a concealed weapons permit, as I'm getting ready to approach them, they tell me. They've told me. Now, I don't know if that's law. I don't know if they have to tell you right then, but when you, sometime in the engagement process, they have to let them know that they have a weapon.
Okay, so that's currently the requirement under the concealed weapons permit law.
Correct.
So if we were to pass the senator from Edgefield's amendment, we're simply saying that as part of this overall bill, we think that requirement should extend to those who are exercising what we are calling constitutional carry.
Correct. That's what the amendment states. Yes.
All right. So I understand that the senator from I believe Richland is concerned about the constitutionality, but it sounds like the constitutionality is already in play with the concealed weapons law.
There is a difference because once you get the car involved, it's a little bit different. You do have an expectation of privacy in your car up to like the arrest portion of it. So if you're out of your car and you're a person walking through a store or something, then yes, you have to tell them. So the difference is once you're in the car. So I think that's kind of what Senator from Richland and a couple others are talking about.
Under current law, if someone's in a car, you're not sure if they have to tell you, answer the question.
Oh,
If
right
you're
now they do not.
CWP.
They do not have to tell you, unless they're a concealed weapons permit holder. But
Right.
but you don't have to be a concealed weapons permit holder to legally carry your gun in a car today.
I understand. You could have it in the glove box. but
Trunk, box,
If you're
console.
a concealed weapons permit holder, you do have to disclose it if you're
Correct.
asked. That's what I thought. Thank you.
Senator from Orangeburg, Senator Hutto, then I'll come to the senator from Williamsburg.
I just
What purpose do you rise, sir?
just ask a question.
Senator, you have a question. Senator Yields.
Senator, did you know the way you describe these interactions is the way I see it every time I watch a video, except did you know that if the officer knows that you've got a gun in the car, he's not going to walk back to his car without asking you to get out of your car because he's not going to leave you in the car with the gun, right?
That's not entirely. They'll keep them in the car. Now, if they step out of the car on their own, the officers are trained not to let them go back to the car.
I understand that.
Have I asked people to get out the car depending on their demeanor and stuff? Yes, I have.
Okay, but if what I'm saying is this, right now, if you see the gun on the seat, you got probable cause to arrest him for improperly carrying the gun.
That's correct.
All right. Under the new law, if they tell you they've got a gun and it's sitting there on the seat, I don't know of a single law enforcement officer who's been trained to turn their back on that person
None.
and walk. None. Right. So at that point, they're going to ask you to get out of the car because they don't want to separate you from the gun.
Yeah.
Okay.
Senator from Williamsburg, what purpose do you rise, sir?
Sue of the Senator would yield for a question or two.
Yes, sir.
Senator Yields for questions.
And Senator, candidly, one of the problems that I have with this legislation is that, and I'm curious as to whether or not you agree with me, when we've got the gun in the glove compartment, the occupants of the vehicles don't have ready access. I mean, there's an opportunity for that officer to kind of see them going and react to it. Do you agree with that?
Yes, sir. But I will say to what you're talking about, in most cars nowadays, they have a center console, and most people don't put it in the glove box anymore. It's in the center console, which is readily available to them.
Not actually, kind of, sort of, because you still got to get in to the console, right? I mean, most of the consoles, they close.
Correct. They would have to.
Yeah, you got to open it up. I
That's
mean,
right.
Seconds become extremely valuable in those situations, right?
Correct.
Because they're split-second decisions that officers are called upon to make.
That's correct.
All right. So for me, I think we're creating greater possibilities of split-second decisions that, in my opinion,